about changing decimals into fractions. First, let's review our place value a little. This is not in your notes, so just listen. First one says write the following as decimals, 33 hundredths. First, let's review our place value. You can see by the chart here where the decimal point is. The first spot after the decimal point is tenths, then hundredths. So I want to write 33 hundredths. That means I need to end at the second spot because that's where hundredths is. Number 2 says 16 8/10. That and is your decimal point indicator. That tells you where the decimal point's going to be. So I have to write 16 first and 8/10. Well, 8/10 is only one spot past the decimal point. 3, 964 10,000ths. Well, how many spots place the decimal point is that? I have tens, hundreds, thousands. The next spot would be your 10,000ths. So I need to go 4 spots. I need to write 964 10,000ths. That means I need to end 4 spots out. Well, 964 is only 3, so I need to add a 0 before it so that I can end in the 10,000th spot. 21 5/1000ths. Again, the and is your indicator for a decimal point. So 21 5/1000ths, I have to end at the thousand spot, which is 3 spots. So there's where the 5 has to be, and before it must be zeros. Now let's write the following as fractions or mixed numbers. Remember, we want to write it exactly as we say it. So number 5 is 97 hundredths because there's 2 spots after the decimal point. So I would write it as 97 over 100. Number 6, you would say it as 6/10. It only has 1 spot after the decimal point, so I would write it exactly like I say it. Number 7, now I have a whole number. So I have my 82 and 9,544 10,000ths. I would again write it as you would say it, 9,544 10,000ths. It is 4 spots after the decimal point. And if you notice, there are 4 zeros in 10,000ths. The next one is 9 and 7. It's 3 spots, so it's thousandths. That's a pretty bad 7. Let's fix that. All right, 9 and 7/1000ths. Now let's do some comparing. Remember, we have been lining up decimals to compare over the last couple sections we have been studying. This is no different. If there is nothing at the end, we can add all the zeros we want without changing the value. So let's take a look. I have 4 and 8/100ths. This one is also 4 and 8/100ths. Even though it has that 0 at the end, it doesn't count because it's not a number. So these would be equal. 20 is 1,000ths, or I have the next one would be 100ths. If I would line them up, I'll write it over here to the side for you, 0.001 and 0.01. Our rules tell us that 100ths, 0.01, is larger. The next one has whole numbers. Well, whenever there's whole numbers, the larger whole number will always be the larger number. So I have 23 and 659,000ths, or 22 and 659,000ths. Here we know 23 is larger. You can stop the video and try the next 3 on your own, then come back to check to see if I was right or wrong. Now the next part of 25 tells us to list these decimals from least to greatest. Again, take the time to line your decimals up. I have 6 thousandths, 6 tenths, 6 hundredths, and 6. Remember, I can put all the zeros I want after decimal points to line them up. I can see the smallest number. Well, I have a lot that would begin with 0 if I fill them in. So then I look next. The next one has a 0, a 6, and a 0. Well, I still have 2 zeros, so I have to go one more row over. Here I have another 0 and I have a 6. I can see that the 1/6,000th is the smallest number, so I would write that on my number line. Then I can see that 6/100ths would come next. After that, I have 6/10ths, and then I just have 6. Remember, lining up those decimals help you. Stop the video and try number 26 on your own. Now let's get into our notes. We are on page 29 in your yellow book. We are going to develop some patterns here, or looking at shading of hundreds blocks. We've all studied 100 blocks before to see what is shaded. So if I look at A, I can see that there are 45 shaded squares. That means there's 45 hundredths of them shaded. Or I could say 0.45 for my decimal, or 45 over 100 for 45 hundredths. 45 out of the 100 are shaded. Look at B. B is a 10 stick, and 4 of them are shaded. So that means 4 out of the 10, or 4/10ths of them, are shaded, or I would write the fraction exactly as I say it. 4/10, 4 over 10. And number C here, how many are shaded? This is another 100 block. There are 17 of them shaded, so 17 hundredths of them are shaded, or 17 over 100. Writing the fractions as I say them help. So when I go to change a decimal to a fraction, use the digits that are to the right of the decimal point as the numerator, then count the digits to the right, and that is the number of zeros in your denominator. So let's take an example. If I had a number as 0.26 or 26 hundredths, I would write it as a fraction as 26 over 100. Notice that I am 2 spots to the right of the decimal point, and I have 2 zeros in my denominator. Terminating decimals, when I hear the word terminating, that means it stops. And you can see some examples here. 33 hundredths, 8/10ths, 25 hundredths, 637 thousandths. We have been seeing some terminating decimals and non-terminating decimals before, but if they stop, they are terminating. Now let's take a look at some decimals and see if we can make the boxes to go with them. The first one here is 3/10ths. How many boxes would you shade for 3/10ths? Well, remember, this is a hundredths box. So I need to have to the hundredths digit in my number, I would have to add a 0 to this. Therefore, I would be shading 30 of the boxes. So you would want to shade 30 of them, because 3/10ths is really 30 out of 100. B is 62 hundredths. Well, it's already in hundredths, so now I can determine how many to shade. Well, 62 hundredths would mean I'm going to shade 62 of them. Go ahead and draw your lines in and shade them up. They don't have to be perfect, just shade 62. Now if you look at it, the C, it's 1 and 7 hundredths. The 1 indicates that I have an entire hundredths block shaded. So I need to shade up the whole block here. That means the whole block of this is shaded. So just make sure you get it all shaded in so you can tell that it's all shaded. And 7 hundredths mean I need 7 more out of the next 100th block. So I'd only have to shade 7 of those. So to go ahead and get 7 shaded. The last one's a little tricky. It's 65 thousandths. Well, I have 100 block. So the first 2 digits there tell me that I'm going to shade 6 of the 100 ones. I'm going to shade 6 of them fully, But that 5 tells me that the next one is only half of it. So I'm only going to go a little bit more halfway. So you go ahead and get that halfway. That's what it tells you. So we need to look, if we look at the number, let me write it big for you. The 6 tells me those are full blocks. The 5 says it's only half a block. So that one's a little tricky. We have to think about it when we get that. Now let's see if we can write some decimals in simplest form. Remember, we have to make them as low as possible. The first one for A, if we look at it, it is 34 hundredths. Remember, 2 spots after the decimal points, 2 zeros in my denominator. So 34 hundredths. Then I ask myself, can I simplify this? Well, yes, I can, because they're both end in even numbers. So that means I can divide them both by 2. So I'm going to divide both by 2 and come up with 17 over 50. B is 453. What spot am I? I'm in the thousandths. Again, I ask myself, can I simplify? Well, in this case, there's nothing that's going to go into a number that ends in a 3 and 0 evenly other than 30, and that doesn't work. So this already is in simplest form. C is 1 and 3/10. 1 is the whole number, meaning that and, when you say it, there's your decimal point, and 3/10. And that is also in simplest form. The last one has 4 digits. That means my denominator has to have 4 zeros. So it's 2,875 10,000ths. 4 zeros. And if I'm going to divide that up, I can start by either looking at 5, because they both end in a 0 and a 5, or I could look bigger if I see it. I'm going to start with 5 and divide by 5. There I'm going to end up with 575 over 2,000. I still have to ask myself, can I go any further? Yep, I think maybe I can try 25 this time. I'm going to come down a row just because I don't have the room. Divided by 25, so I'm just coming over to here for more space. And I end up with 23 over 80. And that is in simplest form. Now, if I looked at these decimals, I need to get them from smallest to greatest. Let's see. They're already lined up for me, so I don't have to redo it. Looking at the first spot, I have 3 zeros and a 1. So that doesn't quite help me. So now I have to look in the 10th spot, which is the smallest digit. I have a 3, a 4, and a 2. Well, 2 is the smallest digit. So 0.2875 would be the smallest. Then I look at the next one, which is smaller, 0.3 or 0.4. Well, 0.3 is, so 0.34 or 34 hundredths would be the next smallest. Then I continue on. I have 453 thousandths, and then I have 1 3/10. That is how you would be able to line them up and keep them in order. Now let's think a little bit about some things. I want to name a decimal point between 99 hundredths and 1. Well, normally I'd say 100 comes right after 99, but how can I get something that would come between them? Remember, we can always add on digits. So I could add on 991 thousandths, adding a digit to them to explain that I would be in between them. Remember, if I line these up off to the side, you can see I could add that 0. 99 hundredths is smaller than 991 thousandths. Now look at number 6. Name a decimal that is exactly halfway. Well, halfway, we know that's 5. So I would say that's 995 thousandths is halfway equals the 5. That's what we've learned before. Number 7 says name a fraction between 2 and 34 hundredths, and 2 and 341 thousandths. Well, that's a little more difficult, but the same strategies apply. If I just add numbers, I can make them come between them. Or if you needed to, you could line them up to see if you could use it. You try that and see if you come up with one for me. And we'll talk about it in class tomorrow. Otherwise, just add another digit to the last one and make it, instead of thousands, 10 thousandths. And then write it as a fraction if need be. And then number 8, you can stop the video and see if you can find another one that could be halfway. Come back and see if you get the answer that I got. See, I had to add that 0 in there just to make it look like it's halfway between so that I can get them the right way. And number 9 says, how many fractions are there between 2 and 34 hundredths and 2 and 341 thousandths? Well, if you think about all the numbers out there, they go on and on and on. So there would be many, many possibilities, because after thousands, I could go to 10 thousandths. I can go 100 thousandths. I can go further and further and further to find fractions that are between these numbers. So there are many possibilities there. If you need additional help, see me in the morning.